Dr. Jacki, founder of Dove Pediatrics and your prayerful pediatrician. And today I would like to dive into a well-known story from the Bible about Gideon. Now, there are a lot of themes in Gideon that we can take and apply to parenting and apply to our relationship with God, but there are some specific things I want to touch on, especially for the exhausted, exasperated parent. But before I get started, I wanted to make sure that you know that I have an Advent devotional that's coming out this December 1st that will lead us through a journey through the Bible as we approach Christmas Day. If you joined me for the Advent devotional last year, this year is new and updated, and I have a really special treat for you. In addition to getting the PDF copy of the entire devotional, I plan on coming on here as much as I can. The goal is to be live every day, but I'm sure that there are going to be days that I will miss or I will have to pre-record. But I wanted to walk through it with you. For example, giving you chances to ask questions or to walk through it with me, to talk about the things that you loved or maybe that you have never thought about before, and to really have that interactive time to review what each day talks about. I want to make sure that you have your copy in your hands by December 1st. So if you want to join me, click on the link below to make sure you're on the email list to get yours as soon as it comes out. I can't wait to walk through this journey with you together as we prepare for the celebration of our Savior coming to earth. Now back to Gideon. I say that this is for the exhausted, exasperated parent because what we see in Gideon is Gideon questioning God. God calls him a mighty warrior, and Gideon says, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Can I just be sure?" And you know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of my children. When I tell them something and they're just not sure. When I say, "Hey, we're gonna go get ice cream later," it's not enough for me to tell them one time, right? They are going to ask me just about every 5 minutes until we go. And I can see how, as a parent, trust me, I've been there, that gets exhausting. And one of our natural responses might be, "I've already told you, haven't I already told you? I've told you a million times. Stop asking me." But I want to look at the way that God handles Gideon's questions. It starts in Judges chapter 6. Now, the first 10 verses in Judges 6 talk about how the Israelites kept falling away from the Lord. He had saved them from Egypt, and he had delivered them to the promised land, and they still fell away from him over and over and over again. So in this particular book, God was talking about the Midianites coming and invading Israel to the point that they would take their crops, they would take their animals, their cattle, and Israel was suffering. And in verse 11, the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon and said, simply, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." And Gideon's responses, pretty much through this entire book, question God. If you're reading the version that I'm reading, the NIV, he says, "Pardon me." He's so polite. "Pardon me, my Lord, but if the Lord is with us, why has all of this happened to us?" And he kind of even gets a little bit sassy, saying, "Our ancestors keep telling us that this was the Lord that performed all of these mighty acts and he saved us from Egypt. But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us up to the hands of the Midianites." And here's what I love about the Lord. He doesn't get angry at him. He doesn't punish him for the sass in his voice, asking where God went. And if he's with us, why aren't we seeing all of the wonders that our ancestors saw him perform? God simply says, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel. Am I not sending you?" So then we see Gideon ask a second time, and again in the NIV, "Pardon me, my Lord, but how can I save Israel?" And we learn here in verse 15 that Gideon was from the weakest clan and he was the weakest in his family. When God calls him strong, he's like, I don't think you're talking to the right guy. Gideon sees what he currently is, but God sees what he created him to be, a mighty warrior. Now, doesn't that just speak to us right there? The world might say that we are something. We might speak to ourselves and say that we are something, that we are weak, that we are small, that we are not able. But God has created us for a purpose. God has created your children for a purpose. And even when they don't see it, and when their friends don't see it, and possibly even when we don't see it as their parents, God still has a mighty purpose for them. And the thing is, it doesn't matter if he's the weakest. God says, "I will be with you." And then he gives him a promise. He will strike down all of the Midianites. They will all be dead. Now here's Gideon's third question. It still wasn't enough yet. He asks, Okay, God, can I have a sign? And he asks God to wait for him to prepare a sacrifice. And I love what God says in verse 18. He says, I will wait. Now, this was more than just going inside, grabbing something, and bringing it out to him. A sacrifice was a sacrifice of an animal. So Gideon had to go get a goat, slaughter it, prepare it exactly how he was supposed to, and then bring it out to sacrifice it to the Lord. He also made a whole thing of bread, and God didn't leave. He knew how long it would take, and he still chose to wait so that he could prove to Gideon that his word was true. That is so patient, y'all. And then he gave instructions to Gideon what to do with the meat and the bread. So Gideon followed the instructions, and the angel of the Lord caused fire to come out of the rock. In verse 22, Gideon realized, surely I have seen the face of the Lord. And that was a big deal back then. You couldn't be in God's presence. He was afraid, just like the Israelites had been when Moses was on the mountain speaking to God, that he was gonna die because he had seen the face of the Lord. And God's answer is so beautiful. The Lord said to him, peace. Don't be afraid. You're not gonna die. Over and over and over again, I see God reminding Gideon, it's okay, I'm here. So Gideon builds an altar and calls it, the Lord is peace. In Hebrew, Yehovah Shalom. God is peace. And I notice right here that Gideon doesn't just question God to be sassy. He is truly questioning. What your heart posture is matters. Many times a child's heart is just trying to make sure. And there's a difference that God shows us between the heart posture of just plain questioning and wanting to trust him with reverence, and just plain questioning because they don't want to do it or because they want to be sassy or disobedient. Gideon questions with an earnest heart and reverence when he realizes who he has come in contact with. Gideon was given several other instructions that, if you keep on reading, he was obedient. And let's fast forward to verse 34. After he was obedient, it says, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he summoned all of the warriors from around Israel, many of the different clans. But before Gideon goes out to battle, he wants to make sure just a couple more times, not just once, but twice. So many theologians have looked at Gideon as an example of poor faith, but I've got a different take. The fourth time Gideon questions God, he asks for a very specific confirmation. First, he says, let me place a piece of wool on the threshing floor. And Lord, if this is you, will you let the wool be wet and the ground be dry? Then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand. And in verse 38, it says, that is what happened. God did it. He made the wool wet and the ground dry, and Gideon wrung out the wool, but that still wasn't enough. He says, God, please don't be angry with me. I just want to be sure one more time. This time, can you make the wool dry and the ground wet with dew? And I love how verse 40 puts it. God did so. He simply did so. He confirmed his word to Gideon, no matter how many times it took. I want to ask you a question. Is that the kind of peace and patience that you give your children when they ask over and over and over? And before you answer, I'm the first one to put my hand up and say, I'm guilty. I'm guilty of losing my patience. I'm guilty of being tired of repeating myself. I'm guilty of telling them, yes, I already said it. Just trust me already. But I don't see God doing that here. I see Gideon questioning, are you actually with us? Because I don't see it. And God answering patiently. I see Gideon doubting God, saying, I don't think you have the right guy. And I see the Lord encouraging him. I see Gideon asking, can you just show me a sign and another sign, because I just want to be absolutely sure. And I don't see God getting frustrated or angry or tired of answering the same question. I just see God lovingly answering every time. So Gideon shows me that when children question, they do three things. First, they just plain question you. You might give an instruction and they just don't believe you. Maybe they don't think they have to do it, or maybe they don't want to do it. But God's simple response is, Am I not sending you? And our response can calmly and patiently be, did I just ask you to do it? Second, children will doubt us. They might doubt who God created them to be, and they might doubt that He has good plans for them. They might doubt that you can protect them, and they might doubt that God can protect them. But I don't see God getting angry. Our job as parents, as a reflection of our Father's love toward us, is to reassure them. You can do it. You can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. God did not give you a spirit of fear, but of love, of power, and of a sound mind. Reassuring them of who God created them to be, even if they don't feel like they are strong, or even if they don't feel like doing the thing that you asked them to do. And the third thing is, children will ask for reassurance. Maybe there's something that you've promised them and they just want to make sure that it's still on your mind. And in all three of those situations, just like the Father showed us how He did, our job is to speak peace. Not once do I see God getting mad. Not once do I see Him getting frustrated. Not once do I even see Him getting tired of being asked. And not once do I see God punishing Gideon for continuing to ask, even after He has reassured him multiple times. I see a loving Father over and over answering His child, reassuring His son, staying right there with him and reminding him that he can do it and that God will be right there with him, even through the really scary thing. My goal for today was mainly touching on this pattern of parenting that I see God exhibiting in His handling of Gideon, but it is starting to touch on some of the points from one of my upcoming videos on parenting children with anxiety. So if that's you, please stay tuned, like and subscribe the channel so that you don't miss it. But for today, I pray that this builds your patience, that this highlights the kind of father that God is and models for you the type of parent that each of us can be when we are plugged into and holding on to the vine. Jesus said, I am the vine, you are the branches. Remain in me. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So Father, I just pray that this video reaches exactly who it needs to reach, that your word would go forth and would not come back void, that you would fill this person with peace and patience. And I pray that they would see a turnaround in their child, that they would see the reward that you give for sowing seeds of peace. That in the very moments that they are exasperated and frustrated, that they would take a deep breath, remain in you, and that you would pour out, your love would pour out through them onto their children, that you would restore broken relationships, and that you would help us to build this community of kingdom mamas who are on a mission to raise a healthy and faithful next generation. I pray that you would stay blessed and stay tuned. Happy holidays.